In this week's episode of the Real World Podcast, I'm joined by Marcus Di Rollo, international rugby player turned lettings director for Gilston Grey. Marcus talks us through his heartbreaking exit from rugby just after being signed by the Real Madrid of rugby, and how that then led on to reigniting a passion for property investment and development. It's a great podcast, so without further ado, let's get into it. Marcus Di Rollo, welcome to the Real Wealth Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
I think the obvious place for me to start is to get an understanding of how you go from international rugby player to directors of letting for Gilston Grey. So tell me a bit about the journey.
I think I kind of always wanted to play rugby, and I think with that, you know, a lot of focus was growing up to go and play as many sports as I can, but primarily rugby. Sort of in football I did, and it came a time where I had to decide because we were all both on the same day. So I effectively decided that I wanted to further my rugby career, which I was in the Edinburgh rugby setup at the time, like an academy. So I went from school to university to do business and administration on a sort of part-time basis, as well as do rugby. And back then, to be honest, it was right at the start of professionalism. So the training.
When was that?
So, I left school in 96.
Okay.
So this would be sort of 96 to 98, around about then. And when I was playing, or when I first signed, I was also doing a part-time university course, and also had quite a lot of time on my hands. It wasn't as intense as I know it is now. So I had a lot of time, and I thought, you know, I was staying at home. I was kind of happy there, and I just saved up my salary, a lot of it, and decided to buy a flat. And my idea was my dad he's still involved he still has a ceramic tile business, right. And then the offshoot of that was bathrooms and kitchens and things
a lot
like
of
that.
Property refurbs.
Exactly. So I thought, look, I'll buy this, and in my spare time I'll renovate it myself.
Sledgehammer.
Exactly. Which I did. I remember sort of sanding the floors, if you've ever done that. It's a nightmare of a job. But anyway, I wanted to do the whole thing myself. I took out, there was these sort of 70s style mock stone fireplaces. I remember taking that out, and then just really putting everything back together, with the aim being to sell it on, you know, once it was done, which it took me probably longer than I thought it would.
It always does.
Yeah, it always does. So it was a great process, though, because I just, you know, almost stripped everything back to the bare walls and then put it back together. So I learned a lot, and and then I sold it, and I couldn't believe, you know, what I sold it for. It was right in the middle of Edinburgh. It was Stockbridge, so it was a great area,
great location.
And when it went on the market, you know, I had, you know, loads of interest in it, and ended up doing really well. So that kind of just whet my appetite.
It propelled it. But was there anything at that time that kind of bigger in your head on the property front? Because, you know, I know a lot of, you know, I guess one was it clear at that point that rugby was going to be a profession for you? And then two, following on from that, a lot of professional athletes realise that it has a time limit, and that property seems to be something that people gravitate towards. So was there a bigger thought in your head, or, you know, you'd just been inspired by seeing the sort of renovations that your dad was doing and thought, right, I could make a bit of money?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think when you sign a professional contract at that age, I was always kind of quite grounded. I thought, you know, if you get a bad injury, you know, that's kind of why I went to university, because I thought, you know, if something happens here, then I need something to fall back on. And I always saw property as a real, like, part of that interest that I had. So yeah, you know, I thought, if I can build up a bit of a portfolio whilst I'm playing, you know, and allocate as much time as I could to it, then when I finish, I'll be in a good position to use it either to, you know, some a bit of passive income, but also maybe even go into that.
Yeah.
that's essentially what happened. I kind of played, and I renovated and sold properties, kept them on, rented them out, used local guys that I knew, my dad's contacts, and also let them through a friend of mine. So,
did you stay active on the refurb side of those properties all the way through that process, or was it because what I'm stacking up here is professional rugby career, the university course, and also hands on the tools and refurb. That stacks up to quite a lot of time, right?
Yeah, it does. And I tried to keep, as a kind of, when I was young and first going into it, you're not getting games and what have you as much as you would like, or involved in squads. But as time went on, my involvement in actual hands-on got kind of limited, whereas when I was young, I was doing everything. However, the experience that you gain just, looking for stuff, pricing it, just putting everything together. I really enjoyed that. And the biggest thing, thrill for me was getting something that was really neat and refurbished or wreck, and then the end value that you add through the process, and then when you sell it or when you rent it out, that was the biggest buzz that I got out of it.
See, I always loved that part of property, and I think what inspired me quite early on was watching shows like Property Ladder, where you can see the transformations. What I quite quickly found out when I started investing in property was I like the before and after, but I don't like the middle. I certainly don't want to be involved in that middle bit. So, quite early on in our development, we established a building company to kind of manage all of our refurbs. That has its own challenges, and I wouldn't recommend anybody getting a construction, but it can take up all of your time if your hands on, because also as well, you get in and you've got a few things in your mind that you want to get done in a day. Yeah, and then all of a sudden those jobs get a bit more complicated, and then you're there till 12 o'clock at night. You can understand how you would want to move away from that as quickly as possible.
No, 100%. I think that's, like you're saying, the middle bit's the hardest slog. And I quite also like the design aspect, because with being involved with my dad's tile business at the time, we'd sometimes go to a tile fair in Italy and things, and it was, I would say that the styles and the trends when we were over there were maybe even a couple of years ahead before it filtered down. So I really liked the design aspect and the finishing aspect of it. And I just felt that, if we could put in something a little different that gave a little bit wow factor, whether it was a tile design, or a module size as well, because over there they like bigger tile modules, and they look a lot better. So that was kind of one of the things that I really like to do with it. Yeah.
Were you very focused on the Edinburgh market when you were investing in property?
Yeah, pretty much. I just had an interest in it, and I thought, I'm not going to deviate too far from this, because I know the market so well, and I know, I know people here. I know roughly what things would go for, the cost of things and things. So yeah, it was mostly Edinburgh properties that I bought. And in the early days, it was you didn't need to put a particular huge amount of money down on everything.
Yeah.
It was almost, and that, obviously led on to its problems. But for me, it was great, because, if you were flipping properties, it wasn't as big an outlay.
As it would be now, yeah.
As it would be now, with all the sort of ADS and all these sort of things as well. So yeah, there was a real opportunity at the time, and to do it, okay, there was a bit of organisation, but it certainly wasn't as difficult as it was, as it is now to build a property portfolio, I think. So yeah, it was good.
I've always, we've got 2 properties in Musselburgh, over 230 odd properties, 2 that are in sort of the Edinburgh postcode, but that's it.
Right.
Because we've always been really focused on cash flow rather than capital appreciation, and then, for a lot of the nicer stock in Edinburgh, it isn't as easy to get the cash flow, but you will get some nice capital appreciation. And when I was looking at the numbers, I was trying to stack up the investments, you know, these kind of lower end assets that we tend to take on and outer limits of the city type locations that cash flow really nicely. The capital appreciation is going to be a bit suppressed in the long term versus taking a negligible cash flow in an Edinburgh type property, but getting that capital appreciation over the long term. And actually was surprised looking at the numbers that in terms of returns, Edinburgh was still coming out slightly ahead because the capital appreciation was significantly more. I mean, you were talking like close to a solid 10% compound annual growth rate versus, you know, 4 or maybe 5, you know, further down the line, the lower end properties. So it was an interesting exercise for me and a bit eye-opening.
Yeah, it is. And you have to be very careful, obviously, because I remember there was a couple other guys in the squad and they were interested in properties as well. And I remember they were saying, right, we're going to buy this. And at that time, you know, it was almost like, oh, you buy a property and then, you know, if you keep it for a certain time, it gets rented out, which is fine, but it'll appreciate. And it was almost like, oh, whatever. I just never bought that. And I just thought, nah, I'm going to stick to where I know because, as you said, good properties, good rentals. The other thing is, once I'd finished, I obviously went on to start a letting business, and we based ourselves in Stockbridge. Mm-hmm. So every property we were bringing on was a high rental property, which meant higher fees for us.
Absolutely.
You know, so if one of our flats was more or less the quality of whatever, of perhaps 2, possibly even 3 of, you know, other parts of maybe the Edinburgh, but also certainly like if you went down to the borders or further afield. So it was a good strong knowledge base. So I was buying in Edinburgh, but they bought. It's funny, they bought a couple down in the borders, and that's, you know, nothing against the borders, but they are selling them at the moment for pretty much the same price that they bought them for.
Yeah, and actually, it's a really interesting point about the letting side of it, because you think about the property investor side of it a lot, but you've got the other side of it as a letting agent in that business. You know, you want the higher end properties because managing a property is more or less going to be the same amount of work, maybe even less for the nicer stuff.
Yeah,
and your commissions are much bigger in pound terms. Especially, I think someone once told me, you know, for a lettings business, you're looking at a property manager for every 80 properties or something you've got in the books. I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but if those 80 properties can yield a shed load more in terms of monthly income, you can see how that starts to get interesting.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I think depending on how, like you said, depending on how much work is in these properties, where they are, how old they are, how many issues you have. But 80, I would say 80 to sort of 120 is probably about where it's at. But that also depends on your the software, the size of your business. There's a lot of
factors.
But yeah, the higher yielding portfolios, because essentially, you know, if your property's on at a high rent, then you're normally getting a particular type of tenant which can afford to pay that rent. Yeah. There's less problems throughout the tenancy. The properties tend to be in better nick and better maintenance through their life. So you're limiting the amount of work that goes, you know, needed. However, you're maximising the management fees that you're getting.
It's fair to say, you know, because we've got our own portfolio and we've got quite a few properties, we've looked at the lettings model a few times. Because, up until recently, every 6 months, my business partner would come to me and he's like, right, we really need to do this for ourselves. Yeah. And it scared the shit out of me because I see how much administrative work goes into managing our portfolio just from our side. And we don't manage the tenant. You know, we don't manage the maintenance, but we still get a raft of stuff we need to deal with day in, day out, and so much so that we have someone in the... So even though ours is fully managed, we still have someone in the office who deals with the correspondence on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, take that up to 220 properties, self-managing everything, take the calls from the tenants, you know, it just seems like a huge volume of work. And stacking up the numbers on our portfolio doesn't make sense. You know, if you're thinking about how many people you need to employ to manage that based on 220 odd properties, it's a few heads, and then you look at the amount of commission you can get in the month and you're like, doesn't really stack up. What I've also found is looking at smaller letting agents that were looking to sell up, because that was another kind of model we looked at, the acquisition model, is they were going for really big prices with very little profitability. You know, if you'd stacked in sort of the director's wages or the owner's wages, who was probably doing 60 hours a week on the business, you know, there's not much residual profit there. But these guys were still able to sell out to some of the bigger companies at a really tasty multiplier. Yeah. Because I guess when you consolidate it with a bigger book, it starts to make
sense. That's a very, you know, the strength is in the numbers, and you can take costs off here and there. You know, I've been through the process a couple of times myself. I think it depends, like numbers and things like that. I suppose it depends on your individual property yields and what your management fees are. So if you say like there's 250 properties in, you know, Galashiels or Wishaw or something like that, but if you had 250 properties in the centre of Edinburgh, you're talking about a different,
very different dynamic, and that's the point. You know, I mean, the profitability in a business that you could create around the Edinburgh assets is monumental comparatively.
Yeah, well, that's it, and that was kind of when we went into it. We went really hard on branding as well. So we opened a shop. It was in Stockbridge. We had really strong branding, and we would actually get people coming in. The shop was probably about one and a half size times the size of this room, maybe twice. And we'd get people coming in asking, you know, how many more we have in the UK, and we were just like, oh no, this is just us. This is it. But it was amazing, the strength to see how people in the locale, you know, just preferred the guy across the road, like you were saying earlier on. The guy across the road managing the property, any issues, he's straight there. You know, anything, you can be there in keys in 2 minutes. It made a lot of sense to a lot of people. Yeah. So I think that's why we had a real good early growth surge, and it made good sense.
So I feel like we maybe skipped a little bit past the whole fact that you were an international rugby player. And you know, you obviously had your rugby career. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So once I'd left university, signed fully with Edinburgh when I was 20, and then embarked. I played, you know, when you tried to get into the team for a while, so that took me a bit of time. Then I played for Edinburgh Rugby up until 2007. Around the time just before I'd signed, I'd also played, you know, all through schools. I played Scottish schoolboys. Then on the transition to professionalism, I played Scotland Sevens. So I played in Hong Kong and Dubai and all these brilliant places. And then I signed up with Edinburgh and got into that team. So I played up until 2007 there, as I said, but through that journey, you know, a lot of league games. I got into the Scotland A team. Then I got into the national team in 2000. We went on a tour in 2002, and I got capped in that. And then I came back from that, had a bit of a break, and then about 6 years into the 6 games into the next season, I ruptured my cruciate ligament. Yeah, so I was out for a year with that. So there was that. There was ups and downs, and then actually the guy. So I was capped under Ian McGeechan in 2002 on the tour. Then I did my knee, and then a new coach came in, and I was kind of out I got one cap. I was out in the wilderness with a knee injury for a year. Then I came back. The new coach was in all the squads, never got picked. for a game. Then he actually ended up getting sacked, and then, which was fortunate for me.
Relief, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because the guy who was coaching Edinburgh at the time, Frank Haddon, he got the Scotland job, and he'd coached like a group of the guys who were my age all the way through. So yeah, I managed to get back in the team, and I played for a couple of years, almost not every game in a row, but I think I played some like 16, 17 games in a row, 2 Six Nations. Yeah, and then with Edinburgh as well, I'd played, I think I got over 120 odd games for Edinburgh as well. So yeah, had a good career. Played also in the World Cup in 2007, but actually 2007 the World Cup was in France.
Wow.
And they were doing heart screenings before that. It's kind of, it was a new thing, and
This was Toulouse.
I got picked up. Well, no, the World Cup was in France, and then I had an opportunity to leave Edinburgh and sign for Toulouse.
Yeah.
So I did that, but at the World Cup they had heart screenings, so it was picked up that I had a heart murmur, but nothing really to kind of worry about. No, I never knew about it. No, so I went over to France after the World Cup, signed with Toulouse, and then they said, look, we want to get, because it's a French league, we want to get our doctors to check it out. So they were looking into all the medical files, doing all these tests, and they actually, after, about 6 weeks, they said, look, we're not sure that it's safe for you to play anymore. So I was like, Chris, what does this mean? So then I kind of passed on this information to the folk in Edinburgh, because they'd screened me, they knew about it, and they said, well, look, we don't have any evidence to say that there's anything wrong. You're a high-performing athlete, you're being as fit as, you wouldn't be able to do all this stuff with having an issue.
Exactly, yeah.
Whereas the French just viewed it differently, and they knew that there was an issue. So there was a bit of arguments between the doctors in France and the doctors in Edinburgh. So I said, look, or the guys in Edinburgh said, well, why don't we send them to London to see the specialist? So I went down to London, I saw the specialist there, and he kind of did all these tests again and said, look, we can't find any reason why you should stop. So I thought, that's relief. Went back out to France, and they said, well, we're still not happy with it, so we're going to send you to a specialist in Paris. So I was right. Went to Paris.
I mean, this must have been a horrendous time. Your entire sort of livelihood, career is just up in the air whilst these two teams argue it out over, doctors' positions.
No, absolutely. And Edinburgh was outstanding, great place. And then you get the opportunity to sign for Toulouse, who are kind of like the Real Madrid of rugby. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to go. I just wanted to play. And, I played in pre-season, and then played a league game, came off the bench, and I thought, wow, this is magic. And then that was it, whilst this was going on. So, kind of long story short, the French doctors were not happy, the English doctors were happy. Mm-hmm. So then they said, why don't you go out with the countries and go somewhere else? So I had to drive all the way up to Belgium, to Liège, and was in, again, this hospital, it was a room like this, and I was doing sort of treadmill, and then they had a bike whilst all connected to sort of heart monitors and what have you, and there was 6 folk in white coats round. It was like, and they said, look, go as hard as you can. So I'm not on this, I was pretty fit at the time. I thought, I'm just going for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did that, and they all left, and I got showered up and went back, and the guy came in, and he was like, I can't see why you wouldn't be allowed to play. You've done this, your VO2's this, all the tests. Test scores, oh, brilliant, Anyway, I'm back to France. A few weeks later, I was like, what's going on here? I'm allowed to play? Because I was still training and all this sort of stuff. And they were like, no, we're not going to let you play because we're a French team. It's in France, and insurance won't cover you because you can't get signed off by French doctors. So and that was it. It kind of came to an abrupt
crashing in.
Yeah, an abrupt end. So
it's horrendous when something like that happens, especially if it's been a dream to get to this level and you're ready to go. But to have had to go through that period of purgatory where you don't know what's happening and you get good news, bad news, good news, must have just really messed with you.
Oh, it was.
Had you moved to France at that point?
Yeah, I was living there. So we just got married in 2007. Leanne and I moved out, and it was about 15 months this was going on. So it was by the time we left. So this was probably going on, I don't know, 10 months, I would say. And it was pretty dark because it was just, I was so frustrated because I think I was quite a late developer and I was 29. I just played at World Cup. I was as strong as I was as quick as I was.
Yeah.
I was lifting good, I was pretty strong. In fact, I was as strong as I ever was, I think. And, for them to say, no, you're not fit to play, I was like, what's going on here? I'm better than I ever was. So that took a bit of time to kind of come to terms with. But, at least it happened at 29. At least I had 100 games, 120 games for Edinburgh, 21 caps for Scotland, and I got the opportunity to travel the world. So I had to kind of just weigh it up. But there was a period that was pretty dark.
Absolutely. So was that the end of the road for your rugby career at that point? Yeah, that
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
And then from there, picked up the pieces, and what was the next move?
Yeah, I came back, and around about 2010, and kind of there was a sort of insurance claim going on because I had to stop and all this. So this took a lot of time to work out, and then my sister had a business that I went in to help there with, just because it all ended so fast.
You had a lot to figure out.
Yeah. So I helped with that a little bit, and then I had properties that I'd built up, and I thought, look, I'm going to try and get into that. And
I guess, I mean, in terms of pivotal life points, and I guess to put some context around this, if you are a professional athlete for so long, there's a lot of positives that come from that. You tend not to make the same mistakes most of us do in our 20s, where we're out drinking all the time and partying and really not having the structure, consistency, mindset you have to do to be a professional athlete. So that must have all kept you very well structured, focused, and for it to come to an end and such. I guess there's just an opportunity for things to go a bit off the rails,
Yeah, there was. I mean, the other thing is, like, going straight from school to university, I didn't have a year out or anything like that. You kind of almost become a bit institutionalised, because when you're playing rugby, they're like, right, okay, on Monday morning we're here at this time, and then we're there, and then we're there on Tuesday, and it's mapped out for you. So, like, to have nothing to focus on was difficult to get to terms with, because you just were like, what am I going to, no one's telling you what to do. You just kind of got to do it yourself, and get on with it. And that's, I don't know, I always found that I wanted to go and work for myself on my own at that stage. I just thought, like, I don't know if it was just to prove yourself out with the comfort blanket of the rugby and all that sort of stuff. So my motivation was to kind of just get on with it and start over, if you like, and just see where it went. So and that's when I started working in the letting business at Coulter's. So there's Sam Paulo and I were part of we started the letting arm of that, and Mark Coulter started the estate agency, but it was effectively two companies under one umbrella. And Sam brought some properties on as well, and it gave us a bit of earnings to start. So that's kind of where it went from.
So what happened, in building your sort of your lettings business? Where was the transition to you're now lettings director for Gilson Gray? Did you sell that business, move on from it? Did what was the?
Yeah. So what happened was Mark and Sam and I were kind of founders of Coulters, and Mark, he did really well under the same premise down in good area of town and sold a lot of local properties. He then wanted to expand, and then he sold part of the business to a legal firm. And we thought, like, well, we'll just that's fine, Mark's still here. But long story short, he ended up kind of leaving the business, and we were kind of left with a bunch of lawyers and ourselves. So there was maybe about a year, and then there was a bit of dialogue, like, where are we going to go from here? What's happening? Shall we merge in? And anyway, it didn't quite work for us. So I just said, look, Sam and I were just like, look, this isn't working for us. We'll just, go and do our own thing. And at that time, we got approached from Matt Gray, because I know Matthew because I played it actually when I was coming up through the club. I'd played a game with him, and we'd kept in touch, and he'd actually helped a lot of the sales. So once I was doing the renovations and things, Matt would sell.
He was your exit, yeah.
Aye, so he worked for a company before that, Hunters McNulty, and he would sell the stuff. So he then left and started his own thing. So just chance at that time, I met him, and he was like, look, we'd like to have a letting side, why don't you come and have a chat? So we did that, and it ended up porting our business into Goulson Gray.
Excellent.
And then I became, lettings director with Sam. I realised some of my shares at that time, because I still wanted to go and do property development and renovations and things like that. So
did you have a portfolio at the time, or was it just something in the back of your head that you were?
Yeah, I had a small portfolio. What I'd done is I'd sold, because I'd sold part of it off because I wanted to get into actual development more than holding. So yeah, Matt, everyone's aware that I'm still doing that. And I've held stuff. I've got some short-term properties on the Royal Mile that I rent out. And yeah, so there's a couple of things that are going to kick off pretty soon. So development-wise.
Oh, so you're doing bit of buy-to-let investment as well as some development stuff as well.
Yeah.
How do you find the difference? I mean, we had our own development business. We've done 3 or 4 commercial or residential conversions. The last one in Falkirk High Street was an old listed building, Temperance House. We turned it from solicitors' offices to 6 flats. Yeah. And we bought another 4 buildings in Falkirk High Street to do the same with. But we were, sort of short, we were promised a lot of support by the council. It didn't come economically, didn't make sense to do them without that support. Yeah. So we got that one project done, finished it. We've done a couple of commercial to HMOs conversions. We've done a farmhouse development just along the road at South Bellsdyke that we still own. So we've done a few, but it's been tough. You see a massive difference between buy to let, which I feel like we can kind of do in our sleep just now, and in terms of buying a property, doing a basic kind of refurb on it, rent it out, pretty straightforward, refinance it. Development can be much more complicated, much more. Yeah,
100%. I think the commercial to residential is a good model. When you're converting an old building, there's can be skeletons in the closet. Oh my God, I didn't account for needing to change. Like I did, for example, a hostel on the high street. Yeah. And as part of the conversion, you had to upgrade all the windows, and there was 29 windows. Yeah. So stuff like that hits you. And I mean, there was still good money to be made, but you just, when you're doing these old buildings, it can be, as you probably know, a bit more challenging.
Well, our last one, Temperance House, it's a historic building in Falkirk High Street because it was one of the first places that John Logie Baird demonstrated television.
All right.
So it used to be the Crown Hotel. It's been about forever. And it's incredible inside. You know, you go up, it's got this big oak staircase. It's amazing. And the first thing we seen it, we thought, right, that this has to be a conversion project. It's amazing. But it's a listed building. Mm-hmm. It's in a conservation area. It has... One of the things we seen when we looked at with relief in the building was that the sash and case windows were all double glazed and they'd been redone in the 90s, and we thought, thank God.
Yeah.
We don't need to spend all that money replacing all those windows. We did in the end, the council did this.
Right.
And that was about 60 grand worth of windows to put in because of acoustic glazing.
That's right, yeah.
Fire suppression system, trying to retrofit a fire suppression system into a building that has, 4 metre high ceilings. They've got a domestic fire suppression system and they've got a commercial one, and there's nothing really in between them. They've got a huge open plan living area in one of the flats. Neither system works. So we had to have the residential system for the rest of the rooms, and to avoid dropping all the ceilings and losing all the amazing coving and all that, we had to come up with this dual system where it was part commercial system and it just became a nightmare in terms of cost, in terms of complexity. These projects are really challenging, and I think anybody that tries to put together a budget on it at the start, your level of knowledge has to be incredible to be able to do an accurate job of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you said, if it's on split limit levels, fire systems and things like that, I was lucky enough that we didn't, because we were going from commercial to 3 separate residential units. We didn't really need any of that, but certainly the windows we did. And things like sound insulation for residential. Also, if the floor's under 80 centimeters from the window ledge, you've got bars on so that people so there's a lot of things that you learn by doing it. And I think you're right, because your knowledge now of looking at a building that you're going to with a possible conversion, you'll be able to say, well, hold on, it's on 2 floors and we'll have to do less. So she'll have built that. So, but that takes, there's not many people that that'll be able to do that, but you will, because you've got that experience. And I think that's it. And so it was similar. I converted a legal office into residential. I did an Alcoholics Anonymous office into residential. I did a hostel into 3 flats. And
were these all to sell, or did you hold?
Some to sell, some to hold.
Okay.
So you learn a lot. But I think my next thing is to try to do new build, because essentially, okay, it's a different experience, but I think the biggest thing is, or the biggest complication is the ground. Once you're out the ground,
it's fairly
straightforward.
But if you get into rough foundations and piling and all that jazz, then it gets very expensive very quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
And another, we've got our farm development along the road, so we converted the old farmhouse. It was a farmhouse and a cottage kind of joined together. We converted into one house and kind of renovated it all. And there was there is still a site we own that's got planning for 5 or 6 new builds.
All right. We're
not doing that development because we've just decided that we're going to stick to the knitting, which for us is buy to let.
Yeah.
So we're selling that site just now because I don't know. I think it's just a terrifying cash flow situation with developments, because okay, you can get funding, but not for everything. And when you look at the amount of money that has to go out over a long-term period, I mean, the Temperance House development took us 4 years from start to finish. Okay, it was through COVID, so there was a lot of delays, but 4 years of only money going out before you can hopefully get into a good market at the end. And if you need to sell, then you're just praying the market's good in 4 years' time. It's not for the faint-hearted, for sure.
No, it's not. It is. as I said, when you're cashing up these things, especially over that sort of period, any delays, any hidden, skeletons, as you say, it costs a lot of money. So at the end of it, you've got to really know what you're getting yourself into, and sometimes it's something that you won't actually see, hit you. So yeah, you've got to be pretty cautious.
Absolutely. So what is the current state of play with your new build developments?
So yeah, we're just basically securing the site. It's pretty far on. Hopefully it should be concluding, literally this week. And it looks to be about a site of 8 houses. We're going to have to put in for
planning amendment.
Yeah, planning amendment for 8, because we just think that the site where it is will be, it will probably suit 8 in terms of what we're trying to build there with the size of them and things like that. So I think it'll be a really nice site. So that will hopefully kick off, and then I've just concluding as well on another conversion in Edinburgh. So yeah, converting a kind of office space into 2 flats. So yeah, then next.
I mean, on the face of it, and that's what kind of inspired us to buy 5 properties in Falkirk High Street in the space of 12 months, and they were all listed buildings. Was just it makes sense, right? That you've got all this dead commercial space that is not going to be realised for retail or any of those sort of purposes, so they have to be repurposed. It just wasn't. We just weren't able to make the economic stack in Falkirk. In that situation, the Temperance House development was a bit of a special one because, one, we got the building very cheap because we bought the commercial unit below. So there's a commercial unit below. It's a really weird configuration in this building, but there's a commercial unit below that's on the high street that was cash converters, and it was a really good solid lease on it, 5 years. They're paying 20 grand a year. So there was like effectively a 200 grand valuation on that commercial unit, and then you had all this space up above it that was ripe for conversion, and we managed to secure the entire thing for 250. So effectively we'd only paid 50 grand for this historic building that it just had incredible features. Now we still ploughed 800 grand into the development of it. Thankfully the end values, we still made money on it, but we've held them because we think we can make more money in the long term. But the economics of commercial residential conversion just makes sense just now. It's a perfect time. COVID killed a lot of retail. A huge amount of more space that's available for conversion, if you can manage the complexities and if you can manage the cash flow pains of it, and you have a solid model that you can exit to, whether that's sale or rental. No,
100%. I agree, and I think there is opportunities out there, and there'll be more, as you said, because COVID did kill the sort of office environment. People now working from home a lot more, or have a hybrid model and things like that. And I've heard my wife works for a big company, and they converted a lot of their office space into labs. I think there was one of the big financial institutions in Edinburgh who were going to actually increase and go into another floor of a building. And they've actually scrapped that, and also scrapped a lot of the office space and just made them meeting rooms. Because, people can have Zoom calls, and if they want to meet a client, they go into the office and do so. So yeah, I think the landscape's changing, and I also think that in certain towns, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Falkirk, there'll be buildings like that that were probably once, residential buildings, and they need converted back. It would be nice for the councils or the government to just go easy on the sort of change of use, which I think is happening down in England. I don't even think you need to apply for that. So
permitted development is a big issue. We don't have any of it in Scotland, and it's more hurdles to jump through. But for me just now, I think the building regulations have tipped things over the edge a bit. When you're looking at a building that was built in the 1800s and you're saying this needs to meet all of the standards that a new build property has to meet, and we're not really going to give you any exceptions on anything.
Yeah.
How is that a realistic situation to be?
Absolutely.
But post-Grenfell, there's no... a very simple example of this on Temperance House was, you've got fire separation to do between the flats. So you're trying to... You've got COVID, like from the 1800s, that's amazing, and you don't want to touch it. And they say, well, you need fire separation between the flats above, so you're going to have to do something with that ceiling. And then planning and building control are having an argument about it and saying, building control's like, we need this replaced, and planning saying, no fucking way. Yeah. And the compromise ends up being that we have to strip back all of the plaster around the coven, not touch the coven, around it, and then fire sheet it. Yeah. And it's like, well, there's no fucking fire separation there because the fire is just going to go up. But what is the point in that? You just created this whole bunch of work to do for no benefit. And the other thing we heard was, fire rated Gyproc. Yeah. Used to be rated for 30 minutes, needs to be, you need to have that 30-minute rating on it. And they were like, well, they've degraded the product so much over time, they could no longer give this 30-minute fire rating. So you essentially had to double sheet. So on that one little cost of Gyproc, you're doubling your costs because Grenfell changed the building regulations, which had this knock-on effect. So there's just so many things like that over the last couple of years that have come in that, we seem to get hit with it all on our development, and it, probably added up to about 200 or 300 grand worth of extra cost on the project. Yeah,
and 100%. And this is the thing, that's like, that's something that, a hurdle that you just wouldn't have probably even considered when you're getting into it. And why would you? If you've got a spec for, if the spec on that product's changed, then you're like, oh God.
And I guess that's the fundamental thing with development. It's long term. You're not talking about in and out in 3-4 months. You're talking about, months, if not years, and a lot can change in that period, both in terms of regulation, in terms of market conditions. You can be entering a different world by the time you get the project done.
And some of it makes sense. Some of it, is going to be even more challenging. Like they're bringing in that you can't, in new built houses, and I think renovations, is it from April the 1st, you can't put in a gas boiler anymore. Mm-hmm. So but everyone knows that the electric boilers are terrible, and they cost you absolute fortune to run. And then it's an air source heat pump. Yep. So, but can you get an air source heat pump if you're...
It doesn't work in every building.
In every building.
Temperance House is another example of this. They wanted air source heat pumps. There was no physical way to do that without, massively degrading the building. Mm-hmm. So we ended up having to go with electric boilers, and they're shit. And the tenants are already complaining that their heating is costing a fortune.
Absolute fortune, and that's the thing. So
you have to have the solutions there before you implement these things.
Exactly. Some of it's almost like, oh, this sounds like a good, idea. Mm-hmm. But if you're putting the end user's costs up by double, or sometimes even more than double, then like what's the sense? And I mean, in electricity, where's electricity coming from? There's gas. Okay, you want to get away from gas, but some of it just doesn't make sense.
There's a lot of these legislative pushes that come in where the reality is the people that end up paying for it are the people at the bottom of the wealth spectrum.
Yeah.
So, for example, we look at all of the legislation that's been brought in really against landlords, particularly in Scotland over the last 5 or 6 years. Look at the amount of rents that went up in the last year. That is all driving up rents for tenants because of availability, because landlords don't want to fucking touch the rental market just now because it's really difficult. You need to know what you're doing or you're in trouble.
Yeah, even I was reading an article, Scottish Association of Landlords, and they were talking about, they'd interviewed landlords who were thinking about getting into to the rental market, and last year it was 13% who were thinking about it. Now it's down to 9%.
Yeah.
we've lost something like 29,000 properties
from the rental market.
It's just like, where's it going to go? And when you think about what's behind it, it's like obviously they're trying to sort this housing crisis, but the real reason for the housing crisis is not the private rented sector.
Yep.
It's something that they're trying to mask, and I just think that like once they've done that, all they'll do is there'll be a less amount of properties available for rent. So what's going to happen? Tons of demand, and the rents are just going to go. So they've actually worsened the situation, I think.
They have.
And until they start, it's like going back to the renovation, until they actually start giving developers, opportunities or helps or grants, whatever it is, to actually start building houses. Then it's not going to get any better.
We have this chat a lot with our clients because they're very concerned about EPC ratings just now. That's a big focus. And they're doing the refurbs, and they're like, should I factor in an extra 3 or 4 grand to get the EPCs up? And not that long ago they were saying that I had to be a C by 2025, and I said to the clients at the time, honestly, I'll eat my hat if they stick to that, because they're going to wipe off so many properties in the rental sector. They can't afford to do it. And it was scrapped shortly after that. So,
but they were also saying that even if you had a house, you couldn't sell it. So I mean, you're just going to block everything because a property doesn't fit. And I remember we went to a landlord thing in November, and I went round to sort of Green Homes guys, and I was like, wait, to get a property, an old Edinburgh property, tenement property, not Edinburgh, just tenement property up to EPC, what do you do with the walls? There's no cavity wall insulation or anything. We put this and it sticks out, whatever it is, 20 mil from your wall. And I'm like, but what about the cornice? So you're going to have a box that sticks out, and then you've got a cornice. And they're, it's only on the external walls. I was like, so you're going to have one hellish looking wall on the external wall, but it's mind-boggling.
Have the solutions and implement them. But don't force your way down a road before you figured that out, because again, they're just having to go back on what they've said, which is a complete loss of credibility. And I guess summarising a lot of the stuff that's happened in the property market over the last 6 years. So, we had Section 24, then we had the introduction of additional dwelling supplement. We had the COVID period with rental restrictions, and our arrears got massive through that period. Eviction ban, that has been extended all the way through until 1st of April. Do you think property investment's dead?
I mean, I don't think it'll ever be dead. I mean, I think if you've got a lot of cash and you're not reliant on borrowings, then there's still opportunity there. I do think that if you're relying on borrowings at the moment and you've got all the other stuff, ADS and things like that, and eviction bans, then at the moment you'd have to be quite crazy to get into it. So I don't think it's banned. I will be interested to see how this lifting of the eviction bans is going. I mean, what's that going to look like? I don't even know what that's going to look like in terms of, how many people are going to get evicted, because if there's tons of people getting evicted and they've nowhere to go, then where are they going to go?
I think no matter what happens, they'll use the tribunal process as a bottleneck to hold back evictions as much as they can. And maybe the case that you're no longer under the official restrictions in terms of the eviction process, but you still can't get it done because you can't get into the tier 1 tribunal. So it will be really interesting to see. I mean, we've had to do a few evictions in the last little while under clause 8A, which is I think the one where you've got 6 months of arrears, so you could still get them out. But even then, there was still a process of, I think we had to wait 6 months. So it's been really fucking painful. But the worst part of it is, rents are way behind now.
Yeah.
And, as of 1st of April, we can put them up, but then there's this rent adjudication process that I don't think is still fully understood. We were being told by our letting agent that essentially we could apply a maximum of 12% increase to the rent, whereas my understanding of reading what came out from Sal was you can apply whatever you feel is necessary / justified, then only if it goes into the rent adjudication process through their kind of
the 0.3 or whatever it is, all that stuff. That's
when the caps get involved.
Yeah.
But there wasn't necessarily a cap in what you can issue in the first instance. It's just if you go into this. So that's what we're trying to work with. But, we're having a bit of back and forward just now with Countrywide Eagle guys, because they just seem to be taking this really conservative view that it's 12% and you can't go more. And some of our rents have fell, way by that, especially when you look at, I think City Let's give a report on so the condition of the market up and down the country, and rents are up like 12-13% on average, higher in some areas in the last year.
Yeah.
So just to keep up with the last year movements, you need to do a 12% increase, never mind, having lost out on it for the 2 years before that.
I think as well, because they kind of brought in half a regulation and they allowed any property going onto the market to just rocket. So what we're finding as well, that a lot of the people that rocket their rent up, which you would do because that's what the market wanted, they're now in a position where a lot of the tenants who took the high rent are now given notice because they've noticed one down the street that's 200
that's a bit cheaper
less. So it's almost back to front thinking, I think, all the time, and that's where we seem to go. We go one step forward and 3 steps back.
I think it's just, for me, the key thing about property investment is you need to do it professionally and understand the market. Anybody that thinks they can just dip in and buy a property here or there without really understanding the guts of it, I think is onto a loser. You've got the Section 24 thing to navigate through, so ideally you want to be investing in a company. For most people, if they're doing that, then you've got accountancy fees annually pay, so one property with £300 a month net cash flow isn't really going to cut it when you've got £2,000 of accountancy fees to pay every year, so you need a bit of scale. Navigating through a lot of the new repairing standards as well that they've introduced, is not straightforward. So and I think for me, I've just been kind of thinking, right, what's next? What are they going to throw at us next? So we had the eviction ban that kept getting extended. I thought surely we're getting to the end of it. They keep putting ADS up. It's now at 6% in Scotland. It's and then the budget came out, a few weeks ago, and again there was like a few murmurings of other things that are going to hit us. So obviously a big thing for us is portfolio acquisition, because it's tax efficient to buy 6 or more properties to avoid the ADS. And obviously at the England level, they're talking about, or they are abolishing multiple dwellings relief. Obviously Scotland has its own regime, so we're okay just now. But the question is just not whether or not it's coming later. And the second question for me there, I still don't understand, is ADS is exempt because 6 or more is a commercial transaction. Is that part of the multiple dwellings relief scheme or not? Is it just a fact that 6 or more, so you're still going to have that ADS exemption where the issue comes as multiple dwellings relief in terms of your LBTT calculation, which may or may not apply depending on the transaction. So it's just another thing to worry about potentially coming down the road. Furnished holiday let, the tax benefits of that are being abolished, and that will affect Scotland. The only good news was capital gains tax coming down, which doesn't really make much difference if you're invested through a company.
It is. I think just from when I got into it, 2013, all the way through, like as a company, this change in legislation, it's just completely changed. You know, back then or just before then, you didn't even need to lodge your tenant deposit. You know, and now it's gone through just absolutely everything. And I'm not saying that previously it was good, because there was a lot of rural landlords, there's a lot of people, you know, giving them their money as a deposit, and, you know, people doing essentially what they were, you know, what they wanted with it. But it's just very, very, very much legislation heavy now, and it's actually becoming a bit of a blocker, actually, if you want to try and get into, you know, property investment. We were talking the other day, and we were looking, you know, if you look at average investment portfolios at the moment, 8 to 9%. You know, so you invest in a company and buy stocks and shares, you can probably look to get 8-9%. Property, like, why would you invest in it?
S&P 500 index fund for the last 50 years has done like 11% year on year. You know, okay, there's ups and downs, but 11% for nothing. Forget about it, you know, versus the alternative. And again, that's why, you know, obviously we're heavily focused in the discounted property market, because that's where you can increase those percentage returns if you're already getting a significant discount in property. But I just go back to the fact that unless you learn how to do this professionally, the returns out there, the complexities are extensive. It's getting more complicated, and you kind of need to keep ahead of the game on it.
I think the guys getting in, people like yourself that can advise on, you know, properties below market value. There's always if you can get in at the right price, then there's always something that can be done, and that's a real asset to have. But again, you know, the average person won't have that to them. I think even property management itself, like, trying to do that on your own as well is pretty complex. Pretty, you know, if you don't serve the notice in the right way, or you miss something out, you risk keeping a tenant that's not paying you in the property, because the tribunal looks at it and said, well, you actually didn't fill out that day and deliver the letter, whatever it is, on time. That's going back to the start, please. And that is what happened. So there's so many pitfalls with doing it yourself, I think, and that's whether you're buying a property or managing your property yourself, that it's making it very difficult.
The barrier to entry is getting higher now every year. You know, a lot of my friends that started in property investment, just buying a couple of properties here or there, bought in personal name, managing themselves. It's getting harder and harder to see how someone could do that and make sense of it, you know.
I think a lot of our stock, actually, people coming to market at the moment, there's a lot of them that have been left property rather than they're actually going into it thinking, wow, I bought that to rent out. A lot of it's kind of, you know, succession, or...
I guess you would have seen prior to kind of 2015, 2016 that a lot of landlords with maybe just like one or two properties, previous property that they lived in, moved somewhere else, decided to keep it and rent it out. Is that completely gone now, or is there still a bit of that?
No, there's a bit of that. That was the second thing. So there's a lot of people that are... Dubai seems to be the in place where everyone's moving to at the moment. Even last week, there was three of our clients, by probable coincidence, that are saying, right, we're moving.
No wonder.
We're moving across. Well, I know when you look at it, you know, they're saying, we're moving to Dubai. I was like, you're the third person I've spoken to this week about that. Yeah, and we just want to rent our house here. I'm like, do you think you'll ever be back? And they're like, well, our plan is no, but we just don't
like
know.
the flexibility of it.
Aye.
But again, they're not, you know, moving on and buying somewhere else in the UK where they'd have all that ADS thing. They're moving abroad, so, you know, it's still, I guess, the principal residency that they rent out. But I've heard of a lot of entrepreneurs I speak to are setting themselves up in Dubai. And you know, the tax section, you know, there's a thing called the Laffer curve, which kind of dictates the level of tax that an economy can effectively sustain before it starts to lose money. So there's an optimum level of tax where you're getting the most revenue, and if you increase it anymore, you actually start losing revenue because people start leaving the country or shutting down businesses, or no longer makes sense to be. And UK's way off the scale.
Yeah,
way off the scale. If you look at anybody that's in a higher rate tax band, albeit the Scotland have now introduced a new band in between.
Yeah.
It's just getting ridiculous now. But you've got 40% tax to pay, and then you get money, national insurance to pay. You buy a house, you've got all these taxes to pay. Fuel duties, you've got council tax, you've got when you stack it all up, that the average person is like 70 pence in the pound of what they earn goes back to the government in some form of tax, whether it's a stealth tax or whether it's direct income tax. There's not a lot you can do as an employee to dodge that. Okay, if you've got companies, you can move things around. It just gets to the point where you're sitting in Scotland pissing down all winter, paying a huge amount of tax to be there. Why would someone want to stay unless they have the obligations?
Well, that's it. And everyone that I'm speaking to as well are like they're young people, professional people, young family. If they go, then it's not as if someone's retiring. At the end, I'm just going to go and live out over there. That tends to be when they come back. But
yes,
but like when you're taking these people out, the types of people out of the equation, you're like they're the cogs in the economy.
Machine.
Exactly. So it's a huge problem, and I don't know if it's a coincidence this week. I think it is, but it's still. I've got a big family. I've got a sister and two brothers. It's 4 of us, and we'll each know 2 people of our peers that have done it.
Yeah.
So
it stacks up.
It stacks up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things go. But we're already looking at, certainly in terms of tax planning perspective, some foreign options, and there's much more than Dubai. I think that Dubai's now introduced like a 9% corporation tax, but you don't necessarily personal residence to have your corporation established over there. So a lot of people are kind of doing that. You want personal residence tax status in Dubai, you need to be there for, I think you need to do your 180 days in the year or whatever. But there's people talking about Croatia, Andorra's a big one. They've got a tax system. Obviously you've got Switzerland.
Saudi Arabia's coming.
Yeah.
Speaking to a guy I know, and all his work's based out in Saudi Arabia, but I think they seem to be using Dubai as like their hub for even work that's going on in Saudi Arabia.
I mean, I know I wouldn't fancy keeping funds in Saudi Arabia, even if they had a great tax scheme. You could see it would be more beneficial to keep it in Dubai at least.
Yeah.
So the last question I always ask on the podcast is, what does real wealth mean to you?
Real wealth, I suppose as you get older, it changes. When you're a youngster, you just want to be a millionaire. That's what everyone kind of says. I think real wealth to me is probably most importantly health. Health. If you're healthy, you're wealthy type thing. And financial freedom, as opposed to do what you want to do, not have any constraints on that. That would probably be what wealth means.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed a guy a few months ago, and he said, someone who is, just the average person has 1,000 dreams and wishes. Someone who is unwell has one. It is extremely powerful when you look at that. My close friend just lost his mother. Laurie lost his dog at the weekend, which was, traumatic for them because they weren't expecting it. These kind of things put that stuff in perspective. And it's way too easy to get caught up in the day-to-day of life and forget.
It is, because I mean, at the end of the day, like the old adage, you don't want to be the richest guy in the
Graveyard.
in the graveyard. So I mean, health, I suppose, is the biggest thing. But yeah, financial freedom's pretty important, I think, and that's I think if you had both, then you could live a pretty good life.
It's a strange thing through kind of the journey of things. I think when we first started in business, we were thinking mansions and Ferraris, the sort of stuff that attracts you. But through the process of building our business and the challenges and the difficulty and just the slog of what needs to be done to get there, it does remap your mind a little bit, to I'm not really interested in that stuff just now. The important thing for me is, security for myself and my family in the long term. And Laurie and I have always kind of thought about generational wealth sort of properties are set up through a trust.
Yeah.
So it's not a big inheritance tax liability that we're leaving behind.
100%. And being a rugby player, I had a bit of cash when I was younger, and I was, you go out and you buy. I didn't buy a Ferrari or anything, but I bought a car I couldn't afford.
Yeah.
And 6 months down the line, you're like,
why did I do that?
Done that? And that's material possessions. Whether it's you buy.
It's a short-term fact.
You buy a 10-bedroom house for you and your wife or kid or whatever it is. You're rattling about in it. You don't use 9 of the rooms. So it's all just perspective.
Yeah.
But actually, sometimes it's just what's important to yourself.
The car thing is a funny one because I've been there with it. I bought myself a Porsche, and after a while, it's the car that takes you from A to B. You don't really think about it, So we've now got these big Road Ranger trucks you see at the front because it's a tax thing. You get the VAT back. You it runs through the business, and I like driving in my truck.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, but I've always said that I'll buy a Ferrari one day. I just don't know when that is.
Yeah. I'm not discounting either, to be fair, but it's just not, not a big focus now.
Yeah.
Marcus, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
No, it was good to talk. Very good. Enjoyed
This has been the Real Wealth Podcast. I'm Alex Robertson, and thanks for joining us on this wealth journey.